Hello, everybody. Welcome to Eat, Sleep, List. My name is Matt Johnson, and thank you so much for being with me here today for Fun List Friday. Now, tomorrow, March 22nd, is a very special anniversary for fans of the Resident Evil franchise because on March 22nd, 1996, the very first Resident Evil game came out. So, we are going to make a list celebrating that today. Let us make the Resident Evil games list. All right, so my story with Resident Evil started off a little late, but I guess normal, right? I was 5, maybe 6 years old, but it was almost 5 when the very first Resident Evil game came out back in 96. A few months shy of being 5 years old, actually. So I was probably not going to be allowed to play that. I probably wasn't. But I really first became aware of it around 1998 when Resident Evil 2 was getting ready to come out. It was being heavily promoted. I recall being a PlayStation guy, going to various stores, and we used to buy the PlayStation magazine. They used to have these demo discs and whatnot. But I do remember one of the features. I think it was for like one of the Crash Bandicoot games. It might have been Cortex Strikes Back or Warped. But the main article on this game or this magazine was about Resident Evil 2, and they had a awesome. Like I almost remember it very clearly, but really cool. Game photo spread. Very awesome article. So I was reading about it, and I was like, okay, this is this seems interesting, but probably something I'm not going to be able to play. And I remember the toy line, which I thought was the coolest thing too. I remember the toy line, which I did end up collecting some of those, but down the road. But this was my real first interaction with Resident Evil and what it was. I mean, a kid, zombies, awesome, right? It seems awesome, but I was far too young to be playing that game. A couple years later, towards the end of the PS1's life, my dad purchased, I think it was Resident Evil Survivor from Blockbuster, and I wasn't allowed to play it, but I could watch it a little bit here and there, and this game scared the crap out of me. It was legit. Like, first, if you've never played Resident Evil Survivor, it was a first-person shooter game, and it had all the monsters and stuff from the first 3 Resident Evil games pretty much mashed into one game. It's really not great, but it scared the crap out of me. Mostly because the graphics were so bad, but the idea of just walking around this weirdly planned city or island, basically, and having these zombies and hunters and lickers and all sorts of creatures coming at you scared the crap out of me. So that was my first game watching experience. But it did take me a couple years to really start to get into the groove. I remember reading some of the S.D. Perry books. They wrote basically the first 3 games, and then they ended up going back and they did Code Veronica, did Zero, but there was also some great in-between books too. That was some of my first time getting to know the characters, and I've come to adore those books for what they are. They're not perfect, but they're just fun. The Resident Evil 2 book was just tremendous, and I think it was The City of the Dead, I think they called it, but good God, it was such a great book. Now I want to go and find it again. But I really got into the game experience. I was over at my cousin's house, and my uncle got like Resident Evil Outbreak File 2, and now the wheels are starting to turn, like really, really turn. Like I'm like 11, 12 years. I got to be allowed to start playing these games at the very least. So we got that. I used to play it when I'd go over, and just delighted. It was just such a fun, surreal, haunting, creepy experience. But RE4 was my very first personal purchase. I begged and pleaded with my dad to get it for me when it came out. Had it for the PS2. I've played it for almost every console that that I've owned and just beaten it probably dozens of times. And that's how much I've enjoyed Resident Evil 4. I remember my cousin's birthday, we did like a sleepover thing, and I brought it over, and we just played it all night. Like, everybody was taking turns, and it just scared the crap out of us. It was so good. But this video game series has meant so much to me over the years. It has been tremendous to be a fan of, to follow. There's so much that goes into these games, from really setting the mood. A Resident Evil game just has to be just right for you to believe in it, for you to be immersed in the experience. Whether it's the music, there's some memorable tracks, but the music has been absolutely haunting over the years. And that if you just turn off all external noise and just listen to some of these songs, you can feel like the tension in some of the string instruments that are used to make these sounds, make this music. The environments have been so great, like wonderfully designed. I love the beginnings of a lot of these games because of how relatable the environments are. Like Resident Evil 1, it's a mansion. I've never really been in a mansion, but it's pretty grounded, right? It's like being in just a very nice house, and there's zombies and all sorts of monsters everywhere. You get the second one where you start off in the middle of it, like a city, right? It just ruined city. And the third one's like that as well. I've always liked that sense of, oh God, this could happen. I mean, it's unlikely, maybe, but this feels like it could happen. And I think that's been most of the charm, is that the environments have never really been that outlandish, for the most part. Never been that outlandish. They're all places that we drive by every day. I think everybody's driven by a police station before. People have seen mansions, and we're out and about in various cities and towns all the time. And to think, maybe the possibility of a zombie infested area is like, oh, it's kind of terrifying, kind of eye popping, but relatable, and that's why the games work so well, I think. There's been just so many iconic monsters, characters, some of the heroes that have been in the games. A lot of very likable people, and there's a lot of very devilish people in it too. It's very reminiscent of regular human nature. Great people, optimistic people, curious people, and then bad intentioned people. There's a lot of that in the games, and some of the monsters have just been iconic. I'm a big fan. I really think that I'm a big believer that the villains make the hero. Like, if you have strong villains, it makes the hero like stand out. And Resident Evil has had a lot of strong villain characters, between Albert Wesker and like Nemesis, Mr. X, William Birkin, Sadler, and so many other characters over the years. It's really strong villains, and have made some of the, like, I would say most of the main characters played as in Resident Evil games are some of the revered as some of the greatest video game heroes of all time. Chris Redfield, Claire, Jill Valentine, and Leon are just iconic characters that have stood the test of time and are absolutely beloved by fans of this franchise and beyond. So, the only thing that I hate about Resident Evil is the movies. They drive me nuts how bad they are. They're so bad. Good God. I think maybe the very first Resident Evil movie was okay. It actually felt like about survival. But I wish they'd just come out with a really, really good movie that really captures what the games are about, and not cheesy, bad action films. So disappointing. But I could talk forever about my history for Resident Evil games. I talk enough on these videos, so I'm not going to bore you with the details, and I'm sure I'm going to talk plenty when it comes to the list. So let's move on to lessons from the list. My, oh my, what am I going to take away from this for a lesson from the list? Uh, I think the most important thing is to learn to celebrate what you love. Okay? Celebrate, I mean, anything that you love, really, but I mean, tomorrow is a very special anniversary for this game franchise that has been, immortalized. All right? The very first Resident Evil game came out in 1996 on March 22nd, 1996. And I think that's important to celebrate. Whatever you love, whatever, like, video game anniversaries are so, like, important. Celebrate it. Even if you're the only one celebrating, just celebrate it because you love it and appreciate it. I think that's an important thing that we need to do, is really celebrate the things that we love. It helps us, it gives more positivity in our lives, I would say, instead of just being negative all the time and just complaining. Let's focus that energy on celebrating something that you love. All right, I love a lot of things. We talked the universal language list. Celebrate the stuff. Celebrate it. Just enjoy it. And Resident Evil is definitely one of those things that has crossed many different mediums and deserves to be loved and cherished on special days like this. So it really is. It is one of the all-time GOAT video game franchises. And someday we will make a video game franchise list. I promise you it will not be as long as the video game console list from last week. I promise. But someday I'm going to talk about it, and I'm assure you that Resident Evil will be on there, and on there very highly. So, and another lesson in using things that we love to make bonds with people. Resident Evil is one of those things, one of those universal languages, I guess you could say, that I've used to reach out to people and talk and discuss what we love about Resident Evil. That's a connection, right? This is what life's all about, is making it. A lot of it is making connections, and Resident Evil is a medium to do that. So, like, I have a connection with my brother about Resident Evil games. I just got a giant rubber Leon Kennedy duck for Christmas. Like, it looks really cool. And I remember years ago when I was really into Resident Evil 4, when Resident Evil 4 had just come out, he got me a bunch of the action figures. I got the Chainsaw Ganado, and which is Dr. Salvador, and then a Leon one. And I love that stuff. Like, that's a strong bond. My cousin, me and him could talk about Resident Evil games. He was the one who told me I should try and find Resident Evil 4 Remake. And it came out on PS4, and I eventually did, and it was wonderful. And I'm glad that I did. Use it as a bond to cross-connect with people. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun having people that you can talk about the things that we love with. So I really can't add too much more, but I think these are two of the most important things that I can scrape from this episode. So there's that. All right, here we are. My top 10 favorite Resident Evil games. This is our quintessential Resident Evil list, but this is going to be the quintessential Resident Evil list. I don't think we're ever going to... We probably won't veer off, like, do another top 10 list for it. Maybe we can find a reason, but it will be a part of others. And of course, make sure you comment along or write them down privately, or you can send your top 10 favorites to eatsleeplistpod@gmail.com. All right? Let's connect. Let's build a bridge over Resident Evil. If it is something that you love and enjoy, let's build a bridge about it. All right? Without further ado, here are my top 10 favorite Resident Evil games. Number 10, Resident Evil Outbreak. The first one. I do enjoy the second one. Didn't quite make my list, but the first one has a lot of things that I was referring to in the in kind of my elongated monologue, right? It's that feeling of familiarity, of relatability, because the first mission is my favorite one that I've replayed over and over again. The escape from, was it Jack's bar or Jay's bar? and it's when the outbreak is first happening, and you're traveling through a bar, and you're traveling through rooftops, and you're on the city streets as the zombie horde is coming along. And again, I think most people watching this video have been to a bar once or twice in their life. Maybe some people have been on a rooftop, but people have also been in cities and towns and villages, and like it's creepy and crazy seeing that relatability. And it was so fun. I think as just a pure Resident Evil game, I think everybody can enjoy this because there's a character for everyone. It feels a lot more based. Like some of the other Resident Evil games, like a lot of the newer ones, have gone off in these like weird, I don't know, like it's a whole nother level of sci-fi. Some of these characters and creatures that you deal with, and this is very down to earth. It's very street level, and like I think the last level you're in a university. Like that's cool to me. That stuff's cool to me. So Resident Evil Outbreak is my number 10. I never took advantage of the PS2's online capabilities, but even as a solo play, this is a really good one. So that is my number 10. Number 9, Resident Evil Nemesis. I'm a little parched, so I'm not going to attempt to make the Nemesis stars scream. But the OG Nemesis is a really good game. The remake, definitely not in my top 10. I don't even know if I put it in my top 15. I thought it was so underwhelming what they did to that game. It felt so rushed. Raccoon City felt so small. Like it wasn't like, at least in the original Nemesis, the city felt bigger. There was plenty of streets and buildings to navigate through. I feel like with Nemesis, it was like one block, and then, okay, you can kind of go here a little bit. Here's the power plant. Here's this other little area. It was so disappointing what they did with it. But we're here to talk about the good stuff, right? Resident Evil 3 Nemesis brought Jill back. It brought an interesting character in Carlos, and it brought this like crazy stalker monster in Nemesis that was so iconic. He's almost been the face of Resident Evil. Like, if there's a Resident Evil game or something, you'll almost always see Nemesis. That's how cool he was. Just a lot of neat features, and I just love that it mostly took place in the city, and there was an occasional building here or there. Going to see the police station, going to see a bar, that was nice. And also it was the debut of the Mercenaries mode. So a lot of props for Resident Evil 3 for that. I like some of the choice options that you can do. You can duck and roll. A lot of cool concepts introduced in that game. And that is why it's my number 9. Number 8, after the... how do I put this nicely? Let's just say turd. I could say some other things, but I won't. After the turd, that was Resident Evil 6. Resident Evil 7 was an absolute breath of fresh air. And, man, back to first person, like, this is really cool. I played it a little late because I was like, I've always talked about on the show how I'm a bit of a traditionalist, and those games went way off track. Like Resident Evil 6 was so bad, it was a huge turnoff for me for a while. But Resident Evil 7 brought back the horror element, the survival horror element, the actual like scares, like legitimately scared, navigating through the Baker family residence and everything in between. A little less fond of the monsters in it because they were all just these molded creatures and various strengths and weaknesses and types. They were a little bland, but this was a great game. I always wanted to play it in VR, but the first person perspective, no matter if you played it normally with a controller or through the VR headset, was surreal. visually beautiful, and definitely took the game in the right direction, took the franchise in the right direction. So Resident Evil 7, can't say enough good things about it. That is my number 8. Number 7 is going to be the Resident Evil 1 remake. Now, the first one, I still enjoy playing it. It is severely dated, and I'm glad that they remade it the way that they did in 2002. I ended up playing it on the Wii a little bit later on, and man, it was great how much they expanded upon the mansion. Like, I had beaten the first Resident Evil a couple times, and it's crazy how small the remake made the original feel. There's not really a whole lot of outdoor stuff. They added a lot of elements, like the Lisa Trevor aspect and a lot of other things. It was so smooth, and yeah, just everything felt bigger. It was a gorgeous game, and I think there's some leaks apparently that they are going to remake Resident Evil 1, and that might be something we find out soon enough. But I kind of hope that they don't. I think Resident Evil Remake is perfect the way it is. It's a nice tribute to the old tank control style games while modernizing it and just cleaning up a lot of the issues. So I hope they leave it as is. But Resident Evil Remake is my number 7. Number 6 is Resident Evil Code Veronica. It took me a long while to get to this game too. I didn't get to play it right out of the gate, but I went out and found it and purchased it. And it's a cool story. It given Claire Redfield a lot of love. It's basically, for the most part, been her last main game appearance. I think she had a couple cameos and maybe an appearance in another game, but in the timeline, this was great for Claire. And obviously, there's a cool side. Last part of the game is with Chris, bringing Chris back, who hadn't been seen since Resident Evil 1. There's everything with Wesker and the whole Ashford family dynasty. There's some cool original monsters in that game. I really enjoyed finding that there's like a glitch cheat code where you can either get unlimited handgun ammo or unlimited green herb right out of the gate. There's videos, all sorts of videos of it on YouTube or wherever. But yeah, it's really good. This is their first entry on the PS2, if I'm not mistaken, and I think it's a little bit underrated. I do. I wouldn't hate seeing a remake for this, but I think it's a little bit underrated. I don't think people talk about it the way that they should. Code Veronica is an excellent game. So that is my number 6. Now for my top 5. And I want to keep in mind that, I can separate the two. I feel like the original games and the remakes can be held in two different classes. So you might see some bunching up here in the top 5 of some familiar games, but I think each should be treated as their own separate entry, if that makes sense. We'll start off with this, is Resident Evil 2. And I talked about how that magazine and the PlayStation magazine article, was really my first glimpse at Resident Evil and what it was and what it, how terrifying this world was. And I remember seeking it out. I was at GameStop, and this was back when they were still selling PS1 games. I think it was my 15th birthday. I was given like $20 to go buy a video game. And they had it. They had both discs in like a little sleeve, and I purchased it and beat the crap out of that game too, many times over. I've beaten it so many times that I think nothing of doing the infinite ammo glitch. That you go to the controller settings, you hold R1 and press square like 10 times, something along the lines of that. But it's just fun. Like the police station aesthetic, which is a little bit more grounded than a mansion. The puzzles in that game were just tremendous, and some of my favorite monsters were were in that game. Mr. X was great. The debut of the Licker, which is one of the most terrifying video game enemies of all time. Resident Evil 2 holds up. The original Resident Evil 2 holds up well on its own. Even today, I think there's a lot of value in it. I'll still go back and play it, and I have a lot of fun doing so. So that's my number 5. Number 4 is a game that sold me on the Wii. I talked about this last week, but it is Resident Evil: The Umbrella Chronicles, the track shooter game that covered Resident Evil 0, 1, and 3, and also had their own little side missions too. Oh, man. 2-player, next to a buddy, just blasting away zombies, aiming for a high score, right? That was a big thing with scores, and you can do like combos, and there was all sorts of little hidden areas. You got to blow stuff up and try and find files, right? Shoot a door down, so maybe instead of going this way, your character can go that way. Or shooting a painting or some kind of statue and trying to grab a file or some kind of weapons. It was a really, really good track shooter. And for somebody who adored playing House of the Dead games in the arcades, this is something I would have loved to play back in the day. And it was a nice throwback to those with a much more popular franchise in Resident Evil. So Resident Evil: The Umbrella Chronicles, if you've never played it, I advise you to seek it out. Its sequel, Darkside Chronicles, is a pretty good game, but Umbrella Chronicles is, in my opinion, head and shoulders above. So that is my number 4. Number 3 is the Resident Evil 4 remake. This is a damn near perfect game, and honestly, all my top 3. They could all be number 1s. I'd be perfectly honest with you. My top 3 could all be number 1s. But Resident Evil 4 Remake took a perfect game and expanded on it and still found a way to be perfect. Like, Resident Evil 4 was like the first 10 rating I've seen in a Game Informer magazine that I've seen. And Resident Evil 4 Remake took all of that, built this brand new world, and crafted this similar but bigger storyline with all sorts of side quests, like big monster hunts and new villains, and still made it perfect. This game is really gorgeous, and it makes playing the OG Resident Evil 4 a little difficult, but I think they both stand out in their own right, and I was pleasantly surprised. I think the Mercenaries mode in Resident Evil 4 Remake is so much better than the original one. I will give it credit for that. But RE4 Remake is my number 3. My number 2 is the original Resident Evil 4, but I am specifically picking out that VR version that I mentioned in last week's episode that I played on the MetaQuest 2 or Oculus 2, whatever you decide to call it. That is the best Resident Evil playing experience I've ever had. It will never, ever be topped. Every time I boot up the VR, that is the only reason why I go back to it, is to play that game. Again, the motion of reloading or grabbing first aid spray, or when you finally unlock the unlimited rocket launcher, right? Just holding it up, like you got to hold it up properly, 2 hands, and fire it off, and seeing just some of these little details up close, and it's really eye-opening. It changes the way you see the original Resident Evil 4. And if you know somebody who has an Oculus and maybe has it or doesn't have it, and you just want to get it, please go play that. It will change your life, probably. But it's unbelievable. I love saving, and you get to type in your name and hit enter for the save file. You're actually physically grabbing keys and puzzle pieces. You're actually like there's certain puzzles that you do where you're like the if you recall forget what it's called, but like there was like the 9 pictures, or you got to organize it. It's like all messed up. It's in the castle level when you're Ashley, and you're trying to get one of the pieces for that mural, and you actually have to slide it and try to get the picture right. physically with your own hands. It is so well done. Please go play it. Cannot speak enough good things about it. And my number one is the Resident Evil 2 remake. I remember this game was technically released the day before my wedding. So it was a midnight release on January 25th. Yes, January 25th, 2019. Yes, I remember. I stayed up late from the 18th from the 24th to the 25th. Stayed up for the midnight drop. It was ready to go on my PlayStation 4. And I stayed up until the wee hours of the morning. The next day when, you're staying in the hotel, setting up, I was back on it, playing it. I brought the PS4 to my hotel room. And, oh, man. Wonderful. One of my favorite, like images of that game is the gas prices from that gas station right out of the gate, like $1.98 a gallon. It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. But another remake that took a great game, expanded upon it, made it bigger, and maintained the perfection. The way that Mr. X legitimately stalks you is incredible. And I think that's what made Resident Evil 3 remake so disappointing, is that Nemesis never felt the way that Mr. X did, where, you fire a gun and you're legit worried that he's going to pop up, or you can hear the footsteps coming, or you can hear the footsteps above you. It was just visually just so good. I've replayed that game many, many times over, and I will continue to do so. They're probably going to remake it again. Who knows? You never know, but I love it. And that is it, everybody. That is the Resident Evil games list, or just plain and simple, the Resident Evil list. I thank you so much for watching this. I hope everybody who did has either found new love and appreciation for Resident Evil, or will continue to do so and just cherishes it as much as I do. Celebrate it. Go play a Resident Evil game. Go back and play the original Resident Evil 1 and see how difficult it is. It is very dated. It is very dated, but go celebrate it. It's a holiday for the Resident Evil fan, and it should be treated as such. But thank you so much for watching. We'll be back Monday with another Mirror List Monday episode. Thank you again. Till next time, do you even list?